Hi guys. Today we are going to practice simplifying fractions. So I want you to think about on Monday when we were talking about equivalent fractions and what that means. And I passed out some manipulatives, and you had something that looked like this. And I want you to think about 1/2. So here's a half right here. And we said that 1/2 is equal to, I could say, 2/4. And here's 2/4 right here. So out of these two fractions, the one that is in the simplest form is 1/2. Because I like to think of it as the fewest number of these pieces that it takes to make that fraction. So in order to make 2/4, I had to have one piece here and one piece here. But in order to make a fraction that is the exact same value, meaning if I look at these, notice how they take up the exact same space. In order to make this one up here on top, the 1/2, I only had to use one of those pieces. So it was simpler to make. I only had to use one instead of using two. 1/2 is also equal to 3/6. But in order to make 3/6, I had to use 1, 2, 3 of those pieces. So 3/6 is not simplified. 3/6, if I wanted to simplify it, it would still be that 1/2. Same thing for 4/8. It takes 4 of those versus only one. So when you think about simplified, what it means is, like I said, I like to think of it as the least number of those pieces. And I'm going to show you how to do it with the algorithm as well. But I wanted to give you a visual just so you could picture in your mind, what that looks like. All right, so let's jump up here. And this is going to be part of your assignment that you're working on today. So I wanted to do some of them together so you could see what it is or how I want you to show your work. Let me get this sized correctly so it's not crazy. Maybe not. There we go. All right. There we go. Okay, so on here, A says 2/8. And so the first thing that I'm going to do is, let me grab my pen. I'm going to find all of the factors that make up 2. When I say factors, think about the math facts that make up 2. So you can come over here and use your multiplication chart, and you can find everywhere that you see just 2 by itself. And then we're going to look at the things that we use to get that 2. So I did 2 times or 1 times 2 and 2 times 1. We know that those together, when we multiply them together, they give us the product 2. So we're going to write down 2, and I'm going to write down the factors. So the factors are the facts that give me 2. So I could multiply. We're always going to start off with 1 because we know 1 times the number always gives us the number, and then comma 2. So 1 and 2 are the only things that I can multiply together to give me 2. And since I wrote them once, I don't need to write them over and over again. All right, then the next thing I'm going to look at is my 8. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to find my 8. If you've got your facts memorized, then you can do this in your head. And I'm going to look and I'm going to find all the things that I can multiply together to give me 8. So I found all my 8s. Let me make sure. All right, so again, I always start off. So these are my 8s. I always start off with 1. 1 times 8. I'm going to put the 8 down a little bit because I'm going to put these in order. 1 times 8 is 8. So 1 and 8 are factors. And then I see here that 4 and 2. So I'm going to put the 2 first and then the 4. And then this one is just the reciprocal of that, so I don't need to put the 8 and the 4 twice, or the 2. I can just put it one time. So 1 times 8 is 8, 2 times 4 is 8. Nothing else, when I multiply it with another number, is going to give me 8. So these are all the factors of 8, and these are all the factors of 2. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the GCF. This stands for greatest common factor. So greatest, meaning I'm going to find the number that is the greatest, the largest number. Common, it's going to be something that they both have in common. So I'm going to see the number here, and I'm going to see the in the list of the 2s, and I'm going to see the number in the list of the 8s for the factors, and then factor like we just talked about. So greatest common factor. So first I'm going to find everything that they have in common. So they have the 1s in common, they have the 2s in common, and then I'm going to look at those common factors and I'm going to pick the greatest one. So I'm kind of working backwards. I first found all the factors, then I found what they have in common, and now I'm going to find the greatest. So I see that they both have 2 and 1, and 2 is greater than 1. So my greatest common factor is 2. So I'm going to erase this because I want some more space on my paper. But if you have room, you can write this all out. But on your paper, I do want to see what it is that you are dividing by. So here, like we talked about on Monday when we did equivalent fractions, I can either multiply or divide. Here, when I'm simplifying, I am dividing, and I'm going to divide by the greatest common factor. So that was 2. And remember, whatever I do on top, I have to do on bottom, that one-ster. And so 2 divided by 2 equals 1, and 8 divided by 2 equals 4. So on your paper, again, I want to see what you divided by. It should be the same on top and bottom. And then I want to see your answer, the simplified form, boxed. All right, so let's go to, this was 2 8s. Let's go down here and let's see what that looks like. So here, let me get my pen. Here's that 2 8s. And we can see that it is equivalent to 1/4. And then what I was talking about earlier about the fewest number of pieces, notice these are the same value, they're equal. So 2 8s is equal to 1/4. And so these are the same value. They take up that same amount of space. I can see if I put them next to each other, they would line up perfectly. And it takes 2 pieces to make 2 8s. I would need 2 of the blocks, but I only need 1 of them to make the 1/4. So it's simpler or easier to make the 1/4. So 1/4 is my simplified form. And so when we're going to use this is we will have an answer, and when we start adding and subtracting fractions, and that's when we'll first see them, and we'll get an answer, and it'll be something like 2 8s, and 2 8s, yes, is the correct answer, but we're just going to take it one step further and simplify it and put it in its simplest form. All right, so let's get back. Let me erase this. All right, let's get back to another problem. Bring this guy back up here. Let me erase here. All right, so let's look at 4/10. All right, so I showed you the way with the GCF. I'm going to show you that one more time, and then I'm going to show you another way if you have your multiplication facts memorized. And so here we've got the 4 on top. So I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to list everything that when I multiply it together, it gives me 4. So I've got a 4 here on my multiplication chart, a 4 here. I'm looking, there's a 4 here. And so that is it. All right, so now I am going to write them down, but I'm going to do them in order. So I know 1 times 4, of course. And I'm going to leave a little spot because I see 2 times 2. And again, I only need to write it 1 time. So 1 times 4 is 4, and 2 times 2 is 4. I'm getting those numbers from here. So 4 times 1 is 4. 2 times 2 is 4. And here's that reciprocal of the 1 times 4. All right, so I see that. So I'm going to write those down. Again, I do not need to duplicate them. Then I'm going to come and I'm going to look at the 10. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to think about everything that multiplies together to give me 10. So of course, we're going to start with the 1. 1 times 10 is 10. And then I go to my 2's and I see that 2 times 5 is 10. And then as I'm looking, I don't see any more 10s besides, again, that opposite 5 times 2. So there's my 10s. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to write that down. I'm listing my factors. Again, factors are those things that we multiply together to give us our whatever we're looking for, that product. In this case, it's the 4 and the 10. And then I'm going to list them. So I always start with the 1. 1 times 10 is 10. And then 2 times 5 is 10. And then there's nothing else that there's no other factors. So I'm going to stop. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to think, okay, GCF. I found the factors. Check. I'm going to find what's in common. So I see that they both have 1. I see that they both have 2. And then that's it. So I found the ones that are in common. And then I'm going to find the greatest. So the greatest out of these, the 1 and the 2, is the 2. So I found that. And then let me clean up my workspace here. Oop. I want my G back. I don't want this. All right, so then I'm going to come over here. And since my greatest common factor is 2, I'm going to divide by 2. And I know that 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. And I'm just going to think, before I finalize my answer, I'm just going to think and make sure, is there anything else that I know would be divisible by, meaning divided by equally, 2 and 5? Meaning, are there anything else that I could divide the top and bottom by? Because remember, it has to be the same. Is there anything I can think of that would go into both of those evenly? I know 2 can go into 2, but 2 cannot go in evenly to 5. And the only thing that can go into 5 is 5 and 1. And I've already tried my great, so that I'm done. So 2/5 is my simplified answer. All right, so that's what greatest common factor. So let's try some now with just doing it in our head, because I know a lot of you have those multiplication facts memorized, which is awesome. So let's look at what this would look like. So the next one, I've got 3, 6. So right away, I know that these are connected because I know that that 3 actually goes into 6 evenly. So, and I know 3 goes into 3. So I'm going to go ahead and just divide this by 3 and divide this by 3. I'm going to make my fraction bar. And I'm going to say 3 goes into 3 1 time. And 6 divided by 3 is 2. And voila. If I get a unit fraction, for example, if you see a number that has the 1 in the numerator, I know that I've taken it as far as I can. So like this 1/4, this 1/2, they both have the 1 in the numerator. That's a giveaway that I'm done. All right, now 4/12. So I'm thinking, and I realize that both of these are even. And anytime that something is even, that means that you can always divide it by 2. And so I'm going to start there. So I'm going to show you what this looks like if you don't pick the greatest common factor. And it's fine. You just have to do a little bit more steps. So I recognize right away. I know that I can divide each of these by 2. So 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 12 divided by 2 is 6. And then I look at my new fraction and I'm like, 2 6. That still looks like it could be broken down even more. And I realize again that both of those are even. So I'm not done. I haven't made it simplified yet. So I'm allowed to go and just keep dividing by 2 because both of these are even. 2 goes into 2 one time. 6 divided by 2 is 3. And there we go. There is our simplified fraction of 4/12. Now, what I could have done if I would have picked the greatest common factor, I would have realized that 4 is divisible by both of these. So if I would have from the start divided by 4, 4 goes into 4 one time, and 4 goes into 12 3 times. So either way, I get the same answer. Knowing the greatest common factor is just a little bit faster. But if you recognize that, hey, I'm not done, I can go one step further, then just keep doing that, and then you'll eventually get the same answer. And so think about those divisibility rules. So for example, like on 5/20ths over here on L, I see that this one ends in a 5 and this one ends in a 0. And I know that anything that ends in a 0 is going to be divisible by 10 or by 5. So I'm going to use that as my starting place. Anything that is a multiple of 3 is going to be divisible by 3. So I can think about, okay, I know 3 times 3 is 9, and I know 3 times 1 is 3. So I'm going to use those things that I know about my multiplication facts as and my division. I'm going to use that as starters to help me get going. All right, so let's go ahead and try some of these now on your own. And I want you to go ahead and practice because you will need to know how to do the GCF, finding that, especially in middle school. And so it's good to practice. And once you get that down, then, and you've done a few with the GCF, go ahead, those of you that have your facts memorized, you can go ahead and just do it in your head, and just make sure though that you are checking before you box it and say that's your answer. Just make sure you think about, could this be broken down any further? And if so, just take it an additional step until it's all the way simplified. And then also remember to think about the blocks, those fraction bars or the circles, and think about, okay, I have to represent this fraction 2/5. What is the most simplified way that I could represent it? Because if I've represented it in 5 different or 2 different blocks, is there something that I could do to where I'm just representing that same value, that same amount in a smaller number of tiles? So be thinking about that as well, and you can think about that visually in your head too. All right. Thanks for watching.